The winner of America's Funniest Woman just put on the best show of her career. The people in the studio were surprised and silent. There were tears in the crew's eyes. Some reviewers would say it was gold for TV. Then there would be awards, but Carol Burnett left the stage and told herself a promise. That show would never be on her list. Not once. Never, ever. She has kept that promise for 47 years. Well, after making a living by making people laugh, the woman couldn't stand to look at herself when she told the truth. There were no jokes or funny voices, just brutal honesty that broke everything her show stood for. What took place in those few minutes in 1977 that America's sweetheart would never forget. And why would someone who spent decades making people laugh out of pain finally make something that is too real to face? The answer lies in a youth that would have broken most people before they could even dream. An Austin girl who is 2 years old sits by a window and waits for footsteps that might bring love instead of chaos. But the footsteps are from people who are not from there and are in their own home. There are parents who are so drunk that they forget their daughter needs them. Carol Burnett's story doesn't start with a laugh. There is silence at the start. If adults chose bottles over bedtime stories, the house will be very quiet, and a kid will learn that being invisible is sometimes the safest way to live. Her dad worked here and there at a movie theater because his hands were shaking too much to keep a regular job. Even though she was physically there, her mother lived in a fog of broken vows and bad dreams, emotionally absent. Both of them would die from their addictions in the end, leaving Carol with a feeling of loss that would last for decades. But the amazing thing about the human soul is this: it finds ways to stay alive even when things look the worst. Carol had already found something powerful by the time she was a baby. That making someone laugh, even if it's just for a moment, could ease their pain. When her parents finally gave up on being parents, she found relief in a place she didn't expect. Mabel White, her grandma, took her from the chaos of Texas to Hollywood, but there wasn't a red carpet ready for them. Instead, they were put in a small, crowded room in an old boarding house with people's lost souls all around them. They got by on $20, 0 cents a week. Even toilet paper was out of stock, so they stole it from movie theater bathrooms. In secret, not out of greed, but because they were in real trouble. But something magical happened inside those falling walls. Carol found out about the thing that would make her most talented and most burdensome. The power to find happiness even when things are bad. She made up Karen, her twin sister. In every way, Karen was different from Carol. Beautiful, sure of themselves, and always happy. Carol made Karen seem so real that even the desperate adults around them thought she was real. She would run up the fire escape, change her hair and clothes, and then come back as Karen. Very cute and fun. It wasn't just playtime. Carol learned for the first time how to act and understand that people need you to be someone else sometimes so they can temporarily forget about their own pain. But Carol's favorite way to get away was to go to the movies with her grandma every Saturday for 50 cents, which was more than 10% of their weekly income. Carol could forget about the squeaky voices and peeling paint for those precious few hours in the dark. Life shone on TV. A dark theater was where Carol heard something that would change her life forever. Stars danced and people kissed. The room was filled with the famous Tarzan yell by Johnny Weissmuller, and it hit Carol like lightning. She went home and practiced that sound over and over again, getting better at every pitch and beat. She had no idea that she was working on her singing and learning how to control her breath in a way that most singers take years to get good at. It was just a game to her. But that yell would later make people laugh and applaud so hard they would cry. What started as a child's desperate attempt to copy turned into one of her first comedic tools. She had learned the most important thing in her life by the time she was 7 years old. Laughter protected her from a world that wanted to break her soul. She didn't know, though, that shield would get too heavy for her to carry one day. Carol, as a child, had no idea how that screen would be put to the test. As Carol was getting ready to graduate from high school, she had one dream that seemed both impossible and inevitable: reporting. She felt like she had to finish what her mother couldn't, because her mother had always wanted to be a writer. The plan was to get into UCLA, but when it was time to sign up, she was hit with a harsh truth. She lacked the $50 she needed for school. It would have meant the end of the dream for most people. It looked like it was for a while. After that, something strange happened. Someone out of the blue paid the exact amount Carol needed, but Carol never found out who it was. No strings tied and no reason given. She got just enough money to change her life for good. She was going to study writing at UCLA, but fate had other ideas. One theater class she chose turned her whole world upside down. Something inside her clicked in that classroom. She stopped being shy. Wasn't bad or hard to see. She was loud, funny, and fully living. It paid off quickly to take a chance and change majors. At the end of her first year, she was named UCLA theater program's most bright newcomer. It wasn't just a title, it showed that she wasn't crazy for going after this impossible dream. But Carol's big break came when she least expected it. As an usherette, she worked at a party in San Diego for 65 cents an hour and stuffed appetizers into her purse to take home to her grandma. Then a stranger in a sharp suit walked up to her. He wasn't working in show business. He was a rich carpenter from La Jolla. He made a deal that seemed too good to be true when she told him her dream of making it big on Broadway in New York. $1,000, 0 cents for her and her boyfriend Don Soreen. They were only allowed to use the money to get to New York and never tell anyone his name. If they made it, they had to help other people do the same. He didn't want praise or credit. He just said that he was repaying the favor that someone had shown him. Carol and Don left UCLA with $2,000, 0 cents in cash. They went east. But Carol had only been as far as Texas before. She didn't care that she didn't know anyone in New York. She said she wasn't scared because she didn't know enough. The money started to disappear very quickly, which was scary. Carol started to cry while calling her family on a pay call. They begged her to come home. Right before she gave up, she heard something on the radio that would change everything. Carol, the name of the storm, was moving up the coast. It seemed like a sign to her, and it made her strong enough to stay and fight for what she won. Without much time, she was at the Practice Club, an old boarding house for young women who want to make it in the arts. Agatha caught in a room with 4 other actors for $18.00 a week. She thought it was heaven, even though there was only 1 bathroom and 1 wardrobe. A silly love song about John Foster Dulles, the stiff and very serious US Secretary of State, got her first big break. It was a joke song that was way too silly and over the top, but Carol sang it so well that it became her signature song. The crowds went crazy. She was asked to be on both the Jack Paar and the Ed Sullivan shows. When she walked out on the Sullivan stage, her knees were shaking, but by the end of her set, everyone was laughing out loud. And exactly 5 years after getting that mystery loan, Carol and Don paid back the full $2,000, 0 cents. The millionaire never replied and he stayed nameless the whole time. But Carol's good luck was just getting started. She was building a base by turning pain into performance and weakness into power. Soon she would become one of the biggest TV stars of all time. She didn't know that this gift would one day make her face a truth that was too painful to bear. In show business, success can happen faster than anyone could have imagined. For Carol, that speed hit its peak when the Carol Burnett show premiered. That night, history was made on TV. 12 years in a row, 30 million people gathered in front of their TVs every week to watch Carol and her team do magic. It wasn't just good numbers, it was a big deal in pop culture. But this is what really made it groundbreaking. Carol Burnett was the first woman to have her own comedy show in prime time. She didn't just break through the glass ceiling in a field where men were the norm, she broke it totally. The show's popularity wasn't a fluke. Carol had put together a dream team that worked so well together it almost seemed supernatural. Harvey Korman had experience in theater and had perfect timing. Vicki Lawrence began as a teenager and quickly rose to fame in the acting world. Then there was Tim Conway. It was managed chaos in a suit for Conway. One of his rules could not be broken. Don't go all out during practice. His best lines were saved for the live shows, which threw everyone off. This meant that every show was brand new and electric. People most often use this example in what is now called the elephant story. In a sketch from their regular family show, Conway told a long, silly story about an elephant in the circus. Carol, Vicki, and Harvey tried very hard to stay in character while he went on and on, but the story kept getting funnier and stranger. At the very end, even Vicki Lawrence lost it. She replied with a line that was so out of the blue that it made everyone on set laugh, even Conway. That kind of thing became the heart of the show. There were a lot of awards for raw, real, and spontaneous shows. It won 25 Emmy Awards during its run. Carol won several Golden Globes herself. The show changed everything that came after it, not just made people laugh. Saturday Night Live owes a lot to Carol's show for making sketch comedy possible. But the most memorable regular part of the show was also the most difficult to understand. The drawings of the family. Carol played the part of Eunice Higgins, a woman whose broken dreams and disappointments made her feel heavy. Most of the time, these sketches were funny and weird at the same time, with just the right amount of edge to keep things interesting. Eunice was angry and upset all the time, and she always felt like life had skipped over her. Even though the person was funny, there was always something sad going on beneath the surface that Carol knew all too well. These sketches were just the right amount of funny and dramatic for years. People in the audience laughed, but they also knew that Eunice's problems were real. People could relate to the character because she stood for everyone who had ever felt stuck or wondered if their dreams were just silly thoughts. When the show's 10th year came around, Carol and the writers chose to go even further than they had before. They came up with a sketch that would push the edges of what comedy could be, what TV could handle, and what Carol could handle. They had no idea that what they were about to make would be so terrible and powerful that Carol would remember it all her life. It would only be a few weeks until the show that would make her swear she'd never watch it again. What happens to someone whose whole job is to turn pain into laughter when they finally face pain that is too deep to change? Carol Burnett was about to find out in front of everyone. The writers had made a family sketch that was different from anything else they had done. It was called The Gong Show, and it would take Carol and Eunice Higgins to places they had never been before. In the sketch, Eunice joins a cheap talent show because she's sure that singing on TV will finally get her the fame and attention she's always wanted. The writers made a choice that changed everything. The situation could have gone a dozen different ways that would have been funny. There were no jokes, a funny accent, or over-the-top moves. There was just a woman who was desperate and delusional and thought that this one moment would finally make her whole life worth living. Finding the good in the bad and turning pain into laughter was what Carol did for a living. There would be no change this time though. This time the pain would just be pain. When Carol walked onto that fake talent show stage as Eunice in front of the cameras, something changed. People in the room were hoping to laugh, but what they saw was something completely different. This wasn't funny. This was surgery that was shown live to millions of people without anesthesia. Eunice sang with a voice full of desperate hope, putting all of her heart into a show that she was sure would make her life better. Then the judges spoke, with Alan Ludden, a real-life game show host, taking the lead. They didn't just say bad things about her, they ruined her. They made fun of her voice, how she looked, and her dreams. Like everyone else had always done to people like Eunice, they laughed at her. Every little reaction on Carol's face was caught on camera. The loss of hope in her eyes, the realization that she had been fooling herself, and the heavy weight of all the disappointments she had experienced her whole life finally broke her spirit. The lights then went down, which shocked everyone in the room. Over time, the camera moved away from Eunice, who was sitting alone on stage with tears running down her face. There is no music, no joke, and no one to save the broken woman in her own tears. The people in the room weren't sure what to do. They went to see something funny, but what they saw was more like a documentary than a sketch comedy show. The group was stunned and kept quiet. A lot of people were holding back tears, but Carol was the one who was most moved. Before she left the stage, she made a promise to herself that she would keep. She has kept that promise for 47 years. That show would never be on her list. Never, ever, not once. She would say why in years to come. She said the pain was too real. There were many ways in which Eunice's pain felt like her own. Carol had been poor as a child and had dreams that didn't seem possible. People laughed at her and told her she didn't matter. She knew what it was like to want something so badly that you would give up everything for a chance, knowing that telling someone you're not good enough, pretty enough, talented enough was very hard for her. That drawing showed more than just Eunice being broken. It showed all the times Carol had been broken in a horrifying 7-minute performance that would be praised as brilliant TV. The reviewers all agreed that it was good. Then came the awards. People said the show was groundbreaking, revolutionary, and the right mix of comedy and drama that showed TV could be art. But Carol didn't see any of that. Millions of people watched, unaware that they were seeing someone's real grief on TV. All she could see was her own pain reflected back at her in high definition. That episode has been in a place that Carol doesn't want to go for 47 years. She has seen it many times, but has never been able to face it. The woman whose whole job was to make people laugh out loud from pain has finally made something that is too real, too raw, and too true to watch. And that may be the strongest proof of how talented she is. It's not always the case that the best acts are the ones that break us. Anyone who knew Carol's story saw the irony. She had been left alone, lived in poverty, and been deeply let down. But she had turned every heartbreak into a joke and every defeat into a comeback. But she couldn't look at 7 minutes of film that showed the truth about her. But life kept testing her, even though she tried to avoid that one act. At just 13 years old, her daughter Carrie would start to fight addiction. Carol would see her child fight monsters that looked a lot like the ones that killed her parents. Carol fought for Carrie with the same fierceness she used in her job. Her idea was that you should love someone enough to let them hate you sometimes. Carrie got clean in the end, and she and Carol became closer than ever. They planned Hollywood Arms, a Broadway show based on Carol's youth together. But tragedy struck again when Carrie died of lung cancer pneumonia at the age of 38. Even though Carol was sad, she ended the play. It was her duty to Carrie. She said the trend kept going when Erin, Carol's youngest daughter, started struggling with addiction. Carol stepped up again when she was 87 and took care of her grandson Dylan. The woman who had been ignored her whole life became the rock for 3 generations. Even though she is 91 years old, Carol Burnett still performs to make people laugh. She has been on Better Call Saul and Palm Royale in the past few years, showing that skills don't get worse with age. But that act can't be touched, even though she has done it for 70 years. You could say it's like a piece of her soul that she lost and will never get back. The episode only ran once, but it changed TV forever. It showed that comedy shows could handle serious topics and that people wanted to see something real. It made it possible for shows to combine funny and sad parts in ways that didn't seem possible before Carol did it, but it cost each person a lot. Carol has said in interviews over the years that the sketch was both important and heartbreaking. She says it was honest and important, so she's glad they did it. She learned, though, that the truth can cost too much to pay twice. No matter what, that act is still the one truth Carol can't face. She's been on stages all over the world, won every award there is, and used her gift to change the lives of millions of people. She can't go anywhere near that 7-minute sketch, though. That might be fine. Art might be meant to be too strong for the person who made it to handle. It's possible that Carol's inability to watch it shows how real it was. The episode that was only shown once, 47 years ago, still has an impact on comedy and drama today. But for Carol Burnett, it's still a locked door and a place in her mind that she's never quite ready to enter. That might be the last lesson in Carol's amazing story. Giving away parts of yourself that you can never get back can lead to some of the best art. Making other people laugh can mean facing hard things that are too much to handle twice. And sometimes the most powerful show is the one you can't stand to see again.